Hi, I'm Robert Christopher Smith, and this is the Lethal Voice Podcast, where I do a deep dive on my own productions and give you an uncensored look behind the scenes. Welcome back to Season 1, Turning to Vengeance, where we explore the blood, sweat, and tears it took to get Vengeance Turns finished, on the screen and out into the world. Last week we completed our 5-episode first chapter, Putting the Cart Before the Horse, where I explained how all this started and how I practically doomed the production by doing everything out of order and just way too early. And make sure you check out episode 0 too. Starting this week, we follow the thread of doom as all possibility of making Vengeance Turns disappears. Almost. So as we start chapter 2, Everything Falls Apart, with episode 1, Slick Talking, let me remind you that in chapter 1, Putting the Cart Before the Horse, you already learned that all this started as I was coming off this enormous high of a successful crowdfunding effort on Kickstarter on my very first try, and then had been able to shoot all of my first feature film, The End of Fun. However, you also learned that I will never be able to complete or release that film for a whole lot of reasons, a few of which I'll tell you a bit more about tonight. My main point, though, is once you hear the pain suffered in the next few episodes, if you find yourself thinking that I kind of set myself up for this face planting of my entire life that I went through, I wouldn't entirely disagree with you. So, warning. If you were frustrated with me during chapter 1, you might want to choke me by the end of this one, and I refuse to let go of my dreams while everything falls apart around me. Remember the shithouse in North Hollywood from chapter 1? Let's turn the clock back to my time living there. One of the only reasons I was willing to put up with living there and some of the hardships that followed was my faith in the momentum of that first film, The End of Fun, which was just starting pre-production. But while I had showed a lot of great instincts in writing and getting that first film shot, I really had zero idea what I was facing with the paperwork and the technical specifications necessary for this thing that I was trying to edit all by myself in Final Cut Pro on a refurbished 5-year-old iMac. It was as I began exploring the paperwork side and what was going to be necessary to ever get the film out to the public that I started to know I was screwed on that film. First, with The End of Fun being a movie that features karaoke, there were the music rights to consider, and I had zero idea of how to navigate or even begin to explore that stuff. But more importantly was the number of signatures and paperwork and stuff that I needed from people that were associated with the Crooked Brazilian, whose influence now had been woven into so many aspects of the film, from producing, financing, and even acting in it, that he had become a tumor of such magnitude on the film that there was no separating it from him or him from it. His fingerprints were now all over it, almost as much as mine. And the more I dug in, the more I discovered the depth of his literal criminality on a variety of levels. But I'll be honest, the biggest influence he had brought was a drop in the quality overall. And he was responsible for a few very specific things there too. But all of that Crooked Brazilian stuff is a whole other story, though. So I'll post that as an exclusive podcast for my Patreon at procrastogram.com if you want to check that out. But realizing that The End of Fun was dead, that it would never be moving forward, was more than demoralizing. It is very much the moment that I felt everything falling apart around me. But like dominoes falling over, it was only the first of many hits coming over the next weeks and months that would leave me believing that Vengeance Turns would join the end of fun in the void. And maybe my dreams of being a filmmaker were exactly and only that, just dreams. By the time I figured out how hopeless the situation was with the end of fun, I had already put the cart before the horse with Vengeance Turns and was plowing forward with about 10 people already on the team for the cast and crew, marching forward toward the vision I had sold them. So of course I never mentioned the problems or that my first film was going down in flames as we worked on the second. I did the only thing I felt I could at that point, and that was to go even further forward. Looking back, I think this is what led to my drive to shoot as much as possible over those months. I wanted to have something in my hands from all the work that we had been doing, all the sacrifice I had already made. But I think I also just wanted to cement that bond that was already being built between me and this team of people that I hired as I put the cart before the horse, and hoping that they might decide to fight for this project along with me, even if it was going to take much longer than we had originally thought. Apparently, not having learned my lesson as fully as I should have at that point, I started reaching out everywhere possible, trying to find another producer, a producer who might see the same potential that I saw and now had a whole team of people seeing too. A producer who would fight alongside us, or even better yet, lead us to the money that we needed to make this film and get it onto screens. I had so many lines out in the water and I had so many people contacting me that I'm not sure exactly where I ended up getting connected with this next producer who scammed us. This one was from America, and we'll call him Slick Talker, but I have no idea exactly where I connected with him. Slick reached out to me and assured me that he had already dealt with similar efforts to get funding on his own films, and he sent links to them. I checked him out on Prime, where one of the films was playing for free. I watched it. It wasn't bad. I continued my research on IMDb. I found info on the other films that he had written, directed, and produced. He wasn't kidding when he told me that he had been working with A-list actors, since each of the projects listed there could be verified as existing. And the talent involved might not have been cream of the crop, but each film had leads with recognizable names. Slick told me that he would write a solid proposal for us that he assured me would attract the money and the resources that we needed to make Vengeance Turns and to do it right. Where I had felt like king of the world raising $15,000 for the end of fun through my crowdfunding efforts, Slick was now floating numbers like $1 million past me, as if it was simply expected that once he wrote this proposal, the money would quickly follow. And from there, we would be attracting those big names to headline the production, and the rest would just be like printing money for ourselves. Except it didn't go like that at all. In order to do all this, Slick had an offer for us and basically said we could take it or leave it. He wanted $2,500 up front and points on the back end once this thing started piling up money for all of us. I wrote up the deal and got the money together and paid him. But let's pause here for a second. If you're not already thinking, hey, I thought you were only doing background work and barely making enough money to get by in a shithouse that someone else rented for you, where the hell did you come up with $2,500? Well, if you weren't already thinking that, then you haven't been paying attention, because I was broke. The little money I did make went right back into the projects that I was shooting, since I discovered that for every single reason imaginable, in order to be taken seriously by anyone, you really need to pay the creative talent on both sides of the camera for the time they devote and dedicate to your project. Getting that $2,500 to Slick set me back way worse than this cat would ever know. But he didn't care. I figured out much later that he was simply doing everything he could to finance his next film, and if that included taking advantage of another up-and-coming filmmaker, then so be it in his eyes. Not only did I have to borrow money to pay him, but the rest of the money that I used came from what I had set aside for my car payment and my bills. And as you'll hear in more detail in just a minute, the car would end up repossessed just a matter of weeks later. After I paid Slick Talker, I didn't hear from him for a couple of months, every day of which I had to keep everyone involved aimed at our goal, which meant keeping focused with a positive attitude and not allowing my current living situation to absolutely crush my spirit. One night in acting class, one of the other actors, quite a bit younger than me, was talking to me about all the projects like Taker and Her Own Demons and the other stuff that I had been getting completed, and he said he wished that he could get that much accomplished and asked me how I was able to do it. I thought about how I woke up on the first night at the shit house and went to the restroom, and then sensing some movement flipped on the light only to see a whole swarm of bugs zigzagging across and around the front of my shirt. How I had screamed, pulling that shirt off, all my clothes off, and then jumping into the shower. And that shower, it only had cold water, and it ran on a timer. You had to pull a cord, and then the water would run for like 2 minutes, barely trickling, and then it would stop suddenly. And the thing is, you had to let it stop all the way before you pulled the cord to make it go for another 2 minutes of weekly streaming cold water. Once I had pulled that cord several times and felt like I was bug-free, I got out of the shower and left my clothes behind. I went to my room, grabbed the keys to my car and a pair of gym shorts, and I went out to sleep the rest of the night in my car. The first of many nights that I slept in my car. As I talked to this other actor at acting class, though, about what it took to get there, to get all that done, to get where I was, and I reflected on those bug-covered nights and the poison clouds of bug spray that would follow, I told him it was really simple. You paint yourself into a corner where you have no other choice, and you find out you can probably do almost anything. After not hearing from Slick Talker for a couple of months of sleeping with bugs and inhaling bug spray, I decided it was well past time to reach out and see if any progress had actually been made. Slick didn't reply immediately. In fact, I think it was only after my third contact over about a 2-week try that he finally replied to me to let me know he was sorry and had been very busy with his own project, but had not forgotten about us. He had a draft of our proposal, and he would send it over the next day. It didn't arrive the next day. It arrived several days later, and only after one more follow-up email from me asking where it was and when to expect it. When the proposal finally did land in my email box, the level of disappointment combined with rage that I was feeling left me dizzy. The proposal was absolutely generic, with barely a mention of our film, Vengeance Turns, and none of the mountain of information that he had insisted that I provide to him, such as our bios, the logline, the short and long descriptions, a treatment, the character list, and all this other stuff, all of which I understand the importance of. But here I was now looking at the first draft of the proposal we were supposed to be using to get the $1 million he was supposedly so confident about after waiting weeks and weeks to get it. The proposal had nothing I had given him. In some places, not only was it generic, not even focusing on our film, but it was literally incomplete to the point where sometimes sentences just ended in an ellipsis. It would say things like, the filmmakers hope investors might consider ... I was about to lose my mind when I first read this, and you better believe I sent a reply to him asking what the hell was going on. He begged me to calm down, reminded me again how busy he was on his own project, and that he had already told me this was only a rough draft, and that he planned on sending the complete draft to me in 2 weeks. Did I mention yet, or have you been able to figure out from the other timelines that I've mentioned, that this was right around the time that our current president was sullying the White House on his first occupation? And do you remember how from day one, 2 weeks has been his answer to every question he's ever been asked, all in this ongoing habit of attempting to shirk accountability? That was exactly what I sensed I was getting here as well. 2 weeks. He had already taken longer than promised to deliver the proposal, and then had only delivered this shell of a template with only the barest mention of Amanda, me, or our film. And the one thing he had really strongly insisted on had been our completely gutting the IMDb page, which we had already proudly put the cart before the horse on and established with all the actors that had already been corralled to star in the film. One of my goals was keeping all these people excited and on board, while the producer I had to borrow money to pay was not delivering as promised and was telling me that they were the problem and had to go, or we would never attract the money or the name talent that we needed. So as much as it gutted me to do so, I completely got rid of every single star, including Amanda as Rebecca and Mia Falcone. Of course, I waited longer than 2 weeks and had to reach out and remind Slick about the deadline that he had set for himself and asking when I might expect this complete and tailored version of the proposal that he had been promising. When it finally arrived, I again found myself equally depressed and boiling with anger, while again I flipped through another incomplete draft. This time, while more customized and including some of the info I had provided after our first consultation, the proposal still read like something that was rushed and was full of careless errors and obvious omissions, to the point of labeling sections that had nothing in them to support them. I have written a lot of successful sales proposals for other businesses in professional sales during other parts of my life, and I really could not imagine anyone even entertaining the idea of supporting a project as a result of reading this document that I was holding in my hands, that I was receiving months later than agreed on, and that had basically cost me every last cent that I could get my hands on. And when I say every penny, I mean every last penny, including, as I mentioned before, my car payment. My car had been my last refuge when I could not take the bugs anymore, or when I needed the relief of air conditioning during the heat, or heat during the cold. But I still barely flinched the night my sweet but deranged roommates came in and woke me up to tell me that someone was stealing my car. The repo man, as it turned out. I was 100% committed, beyond committed, obsessed with filming Vengeance Turns, and with continuing to build my life as an artist and entertainer in this business. That means losing the car only made the results I needed from the proposal and the relationship with Slick Talker even more important and more urgent. So the next time I reached out to him, the next time I tracked him down, the next time maybe I cornered him about this lackluster job that he had done on the proposal, he tried his best to deflect and distract me again by telling me that what we really should focus on was getting an LOI, a letter of intent, from one of the A-list actresses or actors that Amanda and I had put on our wish list when he asked us to. Even though I think I knew in my gut that it was all just bull, I clung to these casting attempts with names like Emmy Rossum and Amanda Seyfried, like life preservers made of pure denial. Since he had shared the whole process, from sending to receiving the letters that turned us down, at least I'm certain that Slick actually did reach out to these people. However, with a few more years' experience under my belt now, I feel like I would have a much better chance on my own signing that kind of talent onto a project than I ever did with Slick Talker. In fact, I know enough now that if I were trying to secure talent at that level, I would likely hire a casting director or a consultant specifically just to get that person. And honestly, Slick Talker is partially to thank for that. If I got nothing else from the thousands I dumped into his black hole, it was getting to see the shape and tone of a film proposal for investors and what the process looks like to reach out to name talent through their agencies or even going around them. The last time I heard from Slick Talker during this time frame was right after Amanda Seyfried turned us down, and I tried reaching out to discuss with him what our next steps were going to be, and unsurprisingly, never heard back from Slick Talker for about 2 years until we were making the movie. But we'll get back to that in Chapter 3, COVID Productions, coming in a few weeks. During those first few days, though, that I was waiting to hear back from Slick in September of 2017, I woke up one morning to find out that the old woman we rented from, the half-dead old woman on the hospital bed in the living room, well, she had gone all the way. She had died during the night. They had come in, tried to revive her, and the whole thing. Supposedly there had been quite a bit of noise made even. Luckily for me, I guess, I had inhaled enough of the lingering cloud of bug poison in my room to sleep right through the whole thing. But this put a whole new twist and continued to worsen my whole living situation, though, as now my deranged roommates and I were told that we would need to move out as soon as possible by her surviving family members. My obstinance, my refusal to abandon the project, my refusal to let go of my dreams, and my refusal to use my degree and get back into a classroom was something that no one could understand except me. I knew that going back into teaching at that point would have sealed the deal on Vengeance Turns disappearing forever. And with already losing my first film, The End of Fun, I felt like I might never find my way back into this creative life that I had fought for over 40 years to commit to and was finally achieving a small amount of traction. As I lost my car and later my place to live, no one was rushing forward to help me. When essentially every person in the world only wanted to know if I was insane or irresponsible or just insanely irresponsible. And that was the question put to me more than once by everyone, including myself. And my answer was that I had gone too far and I had committed too much to turn my back on making movies and on Vengeance Turns especially. I couldn't just walk away. This was more than important to me. It was a defining moment, a true test coming from the universe, asking how far I was willing to go, how much I was willing to commit in order to see this through. I ended up living in my car. Well, a rented car, since mine had been repossessed. All my stuff in a warehouse, and driving for rideshare, even though I hated every second of it. Come back next week for more of Chapter 2, Everything Falls Apart, as I reveal more uncensored and uncomfortable truths in Episode 2. Living in a rented car is how far. Make sure you don't miss a second of that one. Until then, stay focused stay bug-free, and stay on track. I'm Robert Christopher Smith, and this has been the Lethal Voice Podcast.